Happy Thursday, Tinon. Looking through a bunch of PRs, and all of them are you and I talking back and forth to each other.
Yeah, it's kind of a pattern, isn't it?
Indeed.
Hey, folks.
Hey, Toddy, how you been?
Morning.
Doing good. How are you?
Doing all right. We don't really have an agenda today. 5 minutes before the meeting, I started looking through some of the PRs and whatnot and seeing if there's anything folks wanted to chat about. Biggest one I can think of is the tag pagination PR that we've got sitting out there for a while, but happy to see other stuff thrown on the agenda. Hi there, Joy.
Hello, how's everybody's week gone?
So far, so good for me.
I don't think Amy's gonna join us today. I don't know if she pinged you guys, but she's had a family emergency, maybe out of office for a little bit, so just yours truly.
Yeah, I was picking up on some of the comments on her Mastodon post. Figured she had things happening. So other than me throwing the tag pagination on the agenda, does anybody else have things you want to chat about today? Can also chat, Tina and I were back and forth a little bit on the media type and artifact type, what was allowed in there, whether or not we allow parameters and other things like that. So that might also make a decent one to chat about.
Alan, do you want to share the WASI the WASM community discussion of how they kind of choose the artifact type as the way to for their images, because there was a discussion earlier on with anything that was runnable did not want to be using artifact type, right? Or the config media type, however that was. Are we consistent is my question.
So I think you can use the config media type if you have a config. I think that was, I feel like that's been pretty consistent. We've seen that in Helm and other groups doing that.
Okay. Sounds
In
good.
terms of whether they should also specify an artifact type, I don't think we ever got to an answer on that one. I feel like we've kind of been wishy-washy on our side. And I think that gets into 1141, so I'll drop the link to that one as well. So I think that's where you're going with that. That's the wrong copy paste. Let me try that again. Specifically with the WASM stuff, though, they tend to be a really bad example for anything we try to do in this space because they are both an artifact and a runnable container of some kind. So having somebody that tries to play in both spaces simultaneously is difficult for us to say, okay, here's the guidance we want to give to them. All right, everybody's being quiet, so do we want to talk about 1141 since you brought that up, Sajay? So I think that's where you're going with it.
Yeah, I'm probably going to pick on Brian and Tianon since they're probably involved with the runtime the most, and just want to make sure that they're okay with however I just kind of want to get them talking. That's pretty much it, honestly speaking, because I'm looking at it from a registry standpoint. It really doesn't matter, but this impact runtime. So
And I had worked with them just to try to keep at least somewhat of the details in there roughly aligned with what OCI has, and I was trying to be also semi hands-off at the same time, let them do what they thought made the most sense. So I think some of the bigger guidance I gave them was along the lines of making the config digest unique. I think we had brought that back here a few weeks back, and folks agreed that was something that they needed to do.
And Bjorn, who opened this PR, is a maintainer of Moby. So they are one of those runtime folks.
I think the challenge Bjorn was trying to get away from was using the platform unknown as a way to make it something that's not runnable. And I agree with the goal. I'm just not sure of how to properly execute it. I think the other question is, do we want to encourage the creation of a index that has both runnable images and non-runnable artifact content in the same index? Not saying that someone couldn't do that, but is that something we want to encourage and document and say, here's how to do that? And Jory, this is perfectly normal for us. Everybody is quiet whenever I ask a question.
Because they're thinking very deeply about it and really internalizing the consequences, which I value.
They might be eating their lunch too. I mean, it's entirely possible.
I think an index of images and non-images is already a thing that exists in the wild and like widely. This isn't like a niche use case. This is BuildKit made the choice to do this, and now it exists a lot. There's a lot of it.
Yeah,
And-
but BuildKit also had the index of blobs, which we came back and said, please don't do that.
Yeah, so I think there's probably value in documenting, if you're going to do this, here's how to do so in a way that is not likely to break other people. That's kind of the whole point of this specification in the first place. And as a way to signal to other people, hey, someone's already doing this, and if you don't handle it, it might break you. So here's how to mitigate that break and ignore these things that people are being weird with.
I feel like it's also helpful if we were to say, here's the good way to do this. And you might have one or two exceptions here that we know about of people that kind of went their own way. That's also somewhat easy code to write. And that way, the good happy path to do things gets to be something that people can just write a standard bit of code that covers 99% of the use cases. And there's just that one use case that they have to put an exception for. Like someone putting a blob of a known layer media type inside of an index.
I mean, isn't there another way of kind of like looking at it like this is a valid use case that exists in the wild and has been accepted? I know, at least from Azure side, we saw a bunch of customers want to use it, and so we actually enabled that scenario, even though it was not called out in the specification. There's no test or anything like that. But if it is, depending on usage, could be added as a yes, this is also a possibility, and going from v1.1 2.0, this is how it behaves, or this is the expectation. The point is, I'm trying to stay away from like an existing implementation is good or bad. It's being used is kind of what I'm thinking. So if it is, we just need to probably like document it out, but kind of like emphasize that, hey, the recommended way of doing this is how it is. Just want to be sensitive to whoever's kind of like made that choice, right? It's a lot of thought went in. So
And I think that's where I'm trying to get to I understand that folks have gone 3 different directions on this, and I'm trying to be careful that we don't cause 100 different directions of people going all over the place. If we give guidance and say, here's the one happy path down the middle that we think makes the most sense and is the least breaking for people.
To look at this a different way, to get further away from what BuildKit has done, If I write an application and I build that application for AMD 64, ARM 64, and WASM, I should be able to pack all of those in one index that is then an index on a single tag, right? And whichever runtime the user is using will choose which one of those artifacts it prefers. And all of them are valid and fine artifacts published by me, the image publisher. And
I feel like-
only 2 out of the 3 are a classical image manifest with a image config that is runnable by a classical container runtime.
But what's important in that scenario is that the platform there is something that runtimes can look at. And so the runtime can say, what is my platform that I currently support? And what is the platform this index? It's going to see this WASM thing and say, well, I don't know how to run that platform. It's going to skip right over it. I feel like the case that I get nervous of is when it sees Linux AMD 64, but it doesn't look like a normal container image. What does it do in that case? And what happens if that shows up first in the index versus later in the index? Does order matter in this case? I feel like there's ways people can build these things that get very confusing for runtimes. Jory with the notes. I don't think we ever have a person taking good notes in this place. We're horrible about that. Thank you.
No problem.
So Tina, what are the thoughts there of if the platform is something that a runtime knows, does that make it different?
Yeah, I think we can't put like Linux AMD 64 on an SBOM, right?
But
That-
what if it's the SBOM for the AMD 64 image?
It's still not appropriate because we've already have an 8-year long established convention that means it's a runnable image, and 8 years of runtime release versions that will assume such. And pulling 8 years out of nowhere, that may or may not be accurate. But it's
That's the
something like
same-
that. It's a
It's the
large
same
number
place I
of
get all my
years.
numbers. And I feel it's been a while since I've read this one from Bjorn, but I feel like it was going in the direction of if there is an artifact type defined, then runtimes were supposed to make some assumptions. And your comment on WASM is really good there because they were back and forth on whether or not they were going to include the artifact type field on theirs. And they could still change their mind later on and add it into there. And so to have a runtime trying to pick and choose off of the artifact type field versus the media type versus the platform, it gets very complicated for runtimes, I feel like. And for those that joined late, we are chatting about how to distinguish between different kinds of whether we want to mix runnable and non-runnable images into the same index, whether we want to document that as a happy path or whether the people that are doing that today, because there are people doing that today, are considered kind of an exception from the direction we kind of want to give guidance for. All right, this can't just be myself and Tianon. Other folks have to have some kind of opinion.
wouldn't it have to be specified by the MIME type?
So the MIME type is always going to be an OCI image. Sorry, the media type for what in that
We're
descriptor.
talking about
entry.
artifacts. I'm sorry, I'm just catching up.
Yeah, we're talking about if you can mix runnable and non-runnable entries in an OCI index and throw that at a runtime. So can you throw an SBOM and an image that has an SBOM in the same index and have both of them say they're platform Linux AMD 64?
I believe that's currently how it's set up.
But the direction we're going is, are we going to document that as saying, well, someone did that, so OCI is going to recommend it? Or are we going to say OCI is going to recommend a different direction? Or we stay completely out of it to never make a decision, because we're good at that too.
Well, in the case of the SBOM, there's still the additional type, right, of the artifact. And
In
within
that
their
case,
definition, they could define something that is runnable within an SBOM.
yes. There is the additional artifact type in there that they could include. I don't know if they do, but I'm hoping they do. There's also the order the entries in the index. That's another thing you can play with. You can put the runnable image first and the non-runnable images later. I think they have been
Quite
playing with the
catch what
platform.
Tienan was saying, that, what did he say about his conclusion that it's already there or wasn't?
I don't want to put words in your mouth, Tianon.
I'm trying to qualify it, Tina, with respect to, okay, well then what does that mean for new MIME types? So I think that matters.
I kind of worry what it means when you have WASM, and if they start including an artifact type on their artifacts because they're not completely runnable, but they are runnable. They're both an artifact and a runnable.
Yeah, I'm in a bad place because I was just reviewing XZ and seeing how he was injecting code from, just script files. Okay.
So let's maybe it would help to come up with an imaginary new artifact type that is runnable, but is also platform specific. Like, say, imagine I wanted to upload jars directly as images, and I have some container runtime that knows how to sandbox Java appropriately such that those are safe for me to run, but they might contain platform specific files. They shouldn't, but they might, right? So it has to be a platform specific bundle. Would it be appropriate for me to put Linux AMD 64 on that artifact?
I think they should use the platform object, but it would be our suggestion. But how can we stop them?
Yeah, I don't think we're going to meaningfully stop them. I think the question of whether or not it's appropriate to do so really relies on the actual implementations in the runtimes and whether or not they're currently comparing that media type on the index objects, which I think they are. I think that they would balk appropriately at this in the media type field. If it's an optional extra artifact type field, probably not, but even in that case, they're still going to blow up when they try to extract the layers, and the layer has a media type of like application/Java, Tianan's hacked up Java idea, not application/tar, whatever it is.
Yep. And that also brings up, the SBOM requirements of being able to know whether or not a blob like an image has executable code in it in the header. For example, how Windows allows you to have executable code in an image when you download it and run it. Should the SBOM know that and describe it? See, yeah, probably. This is an image, a JPEG with executable code in it for a particular platform, Windows. I'm just saying. How is it really our place to define these things? I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't think we're going to be able to sheriff it, if you will, right? We can only recommend and make suggestions. You probably already said that, Brandon.
Sorry, I got distracted by Jory catching on. We've got two Mike Browns in here, and
Oh,
The
yeah.
chaos
I
that we
thought for
always
a second,
get.
I was like, oh, you're in here twice, Mike, and then I realized, oh, no, wait, there are two.
OCI is just that crazy.
Right. And I have an uncle, Mike Brown. I should invite him
Right.
next time.
They
He's a
both have
welder
beards.
though, so I
It's a
don't
very
know.
common name.
Yeah.
Both have beards. Both have glasses. Just different levels of gray.
Thanks for not mentioning that part.
Doesn't,
Okay, sorry for
So-
that distraction. Go ahead, Tina.
back to the ordering question you asked, geez, probably 15 minutes ago or more. Doesn't the spec give guidance on the order in which runtimes should consider elements of the index?
We do. That was one of my additions I threw in there a while back, which was if you see multiple entries and you can't tell the difference, pick the first one.
The first matching entry should be used.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think this is on image publishers. If they want to use my theoretical insane ideas or Sajay's less theoretical .NET cloud native ideas, then they and also have a standard quote unquote container image, then they need to order those appropriately so that older runtimes will pick the standard container image, and newer runtimes that are aware of this artifact type will go, oh, hey, I actually prefer those because I know that that's going to be more efficient for my use case, and pick the first of those instead of the first generally matching the platform.
That,
This is a vector problem in the runtimes, not necessarily something we can solve. And
That
image
may be-
publishers publishing their images correctly, ordering them correctly.
you may be teeing up Marcin here, so I'll kind of mention his name and get him thinking for a second. But that's been what we've been chatting about a lot with the image compatibility working group. And something to keep in mind is it gets more complicated when you start having the multiple versions. So you've got AMD 64, AMD 64 V2. Or if your artifact is on V2 and you just have a generic V1 image that's runnable. And now you try to run this on a V2 system that says, oh, I know about V2. Let me try that. Once we take it a step farther and start adding the image compatibility stuff, I think it's going to get even more complicated. So to be able to say, look, this thing is definitely runnable, this thing is definitely not, I feel like there's a value to runtimes. And I don't know the good way to do that other than the easy cop-out answer is just say, stop mixing the two. Only give runtimes an index of runnable stuff. But that's definitely a cop-out answer. So Marcin, I name dropped you a little bit there. If folks want to hear some chat about where we've gotten so far with the image compatibility, we can deviate over there, or we can keep going down this path, whichever way you guys want to go. Hey, nobody's saying anything. Y'all are too good at that. Everybody's got their mouth full.
I'll say something. It's more of a question, perhaps. So I'm seeing that this is all material that's being discussed in a file heading called artifacts guidance.mv. If I were reading this, bearing in mind, of course, that I'm not you know, an expert in your field, I would read guidance as sort of non-normative, like not required, but just current thinking. And I should not necessarily expect this thinking to go on, you know, forever unchanged. So I wonder if, in hearing sort of a general agreement that some guidance should be provided, and there's not exactly a ton of passionate thinking to the contrary here, if it's okay to go forward with the guidance as provided. And then, but then again, I don't know what your community has sort of come to expect from this document, if they really do interpret it as something that's normative. But this is just me looking at this as an outsider.
Yeah, we've definitely used guidance as a term of saying this is much more of a looser definition here. This is not something we're used or may, should, must language. We're not writing a hard spec around this. This is just, for anybody implementing this, you're probably going to have a lot better luck with compatibility of other implementers if you follow this. But if you go off and write your own registry, your own image, your own tooling all around it, do whatever you want. And you can still call it OCI compatible as long as you follow the rest of the spec language.
Wasn't this guidance added in 1.1? Like, I don't
Yep.
think this doc even existed until then, right? So outside of this group, frankly, there's probably not a lot of people who've even read it.
More people read it than I thought they had, because all of a sudden, last KubeCon, feel like half the talks I was watching now. Of course, I keep picking specific ones. People are mentioning artifacts a lot in that one. I think everybody saw OCI release a new toy. Let's use it.
This bad boy can fit so many jars.
So what options do we have? We've got multiple order and just kind of putting the runnable stuff first. We've got messing with the platform and saying, look, if you've got an AMD 64 artifact that's not runnable, you can't use a runnable platform in there. You have to say unknown or something like that. We've got, depending on the artifact type, that gets a little funny, because when you start using the artifact type for defining runnable, there's always the chance that someone's going to make a runnable artifact that has an artifact type on it. Any other ideas? Just starting to brainstorm a little bit with folks here. How else to differentiate?
Might need your help summarizing those options in the notes.
Yeah,
I don't know. The first stupid idea I have in my mind to see the difference is just additional annotation, just for brainstorming, like if it's runnable or not.
I think Bjorn actually mentioned that as one of the last comments, is like add, enrich it with some kind of annotation. So it's not unthought of, at least. So, but it is a unique option. But older runtimes wouldn't read that, right? So it's going to be tricky.
I was skimming over some of the things I mentioned in this particular PR, this reference, Brandon. And it came to my mind again, right, that we can do these indexes as a sub-index, not just, they don't have to be at the platform index.
Oh, yeah. I see that's tracked around.
And if you go in that route, then the platform will be where you select the version and the platform, right? That might simplify this, if that's our recommendation.
Did you happen to see the question in the general chat this week about Artifactory?
No.
Apparently, Artifactory may not may have an issue with nested index entries.
Well, there you go. Can we fix that, Sajid? Of course.
That's gonna be JFrog, so
I'm just saying that would be one route, right? To having a
Yeah.
platform I'm sorry, a runnable set of index items for, artifacts that sit underneath the platform. So you wouldn't have to have per platform artifacts, which might get confusing.
Yeah.
I assume that's what you guys were talking about at the beginning of the call.
I wasn't going to go nested index, but others are
Okay.
always welcome to.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't they support a manifest of index type as I guess we have to look at the code.
I think some people have read, let me go pull it up. I think in the image spec itself, some people have read that and they've read it quite literally. And the guidance we were giving was focused around runtimes. But we've said that you need to support an OCI index and OCI image manifest as a possible descriptor in there. You must support that. They should support other entries, but that's not a requirement.
Yeah, platform index was not a requirement of all runtimes.
Yeah. So the runtimes possibly won't support it. And the registries kind of looked at this and was like, well, if a runtime doesn't support it, we're going to block it. And so registries themselves reject it. We've seen some registries that say if you've got an OCI index, you cannot have a Docker image as one of the child entries. You can't mix and match the media types.
And so they're putting together arrays.
Is that both for OCI index and the Docker version?
I don't know if it goes the other way, but I wouldn't be surprised if it does. I think it was Quay that was doing that hard filtering on those media types, saying if you use an OCI index, you must have an OCI image. You can't mix and match the media types. And we from the OCI side can't say that's wrong because from us, we can't say you must support a Docker image inside the OCI spec. That kind of feels a little weird.
But he would down in
It's not our media type.
2.0 discussion on
how they track all the
what manifest types are we allowed to link to from an index. I think that's an important discussion.
and
I think there's also potential we could say that, hey, you should support everything. If you're able to pull down this manifest and the manifest is inside your repo, you must be able to have that as an entry in the index. That would be a way around that. That way we're not calling out specific other specs that are third-party specs or vendor-specific specs. We're just saying, hey, your registry, if it supports it, then you need to include it.
I agree with what Brian's saying here. We didn't force them, but we did. There is an opportunity to advantage the person that has an artifact type definition, as opposed to requiring you pull the manifest and get it there.
Yeah, the artifact type can help you have an idea. You don't have to go and get the config media type in case they did something funny there. It's still going to be a non-perfect answer if you have artifacts that, if you have runnable artifacts that define artifact type, then it's not just a binary choice. It's some kind of lookup in a table of here are all the known artifact types I know how to run, which it is a runtime, it wouldn't know how to run them, but
I mean, we
still
already
gets
have
a little,
that.
yeah.
It's, to me, it's like you go to look at an image that you want to pull. Sorry, I guess I shouldn't use the term image. You go to look at a reference, you get an index. You're like, okay, which one should I be pulling? And you've got a list of platforms, and that's currently the only thing anybody ever selects on that I'm aware of at the moment. At least when you're talking about running something. But then you can end up pulling that and then seeing, oh, I don't know what this media type is that this manifest is pointing to. I don't see really any difference in terms of Yeah, I guess what I'm really can't really get past is the artifact type here is just a way to not have to pull down the manifest while you're trying to select what thing to fetch. And I have no problem with that. I'm just like putting that out there.
It avoids a pull,
Yeah.
an extra manifest pull.
And
Does
it's
have-
always like, it could be always nice to have that, regardless of if it's a runnable image or not.
It does have the downside that older clients don't know how to use it.
Yep.
So if you have a 1.0 client and it's pulling down this index that has data that it should be able to execute, it doesn't know to look at that and say, hey, there's that artifact type field there defined. I need to ignore it. So when we
Or
think
look at
about
the type and the type of the artifact type, and it's like, oh, this is just an image config or something like that.
a client that knows how to look at that field will be good.
Yeah.
I'm just throwing out there are older clients out there that wouldn't know to look for that. So
Yeah, like every
there's
client,
a
so-
risk of avoiding breaking those.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think this is a way to not have platform unknown unknown. But
I agree, Brian. We're trying to solve one problem with another.
to be clear, I like it. Like, I like not having to drill down into the manifest, and we don't have to worry about, oh, is the data too big to stuff into this into
Right.
that data field? It's like, just you can stick the config type right there.
Right. And I like it being in both places. So you can have this reference when you're in the other place and verification validation. And it helps Brandon's scenario where we can change our sequence we're pushing.
The wrench nobody wants to know about is the way Sigstore has been pushing their signatures in the past, which is that they hijack the config media type as well, because there are certain registries that are filtering out. And so to make it as, I don't want to say portable, but I'm going to say portable. To make it be able to be deployed to as many registries as possible, they use the same image media type, the config media type as well.
Under the same
Just
field
that
or
registries-
with an annotation?
They might have some annotations in there, but the idea was they made it look as much like an image as possible, just because they wanted a registry to not reject it. Now the advantage is they don't put this inside the index, so they're outside the index. You don't try to run a signature and you're good. But they did kind of take steps in the past, and they might be changing that going forward. But at least historically, they have had signatures that look exactly like an image, just so the registries don't reject it.
Sorry, Jory. We're trying to take notes on this.
We keep going different directions all over the place. This is stream of thought conscious here.
Well, eventually I'll figure out like what's important and what's less so.
Yeah, the Sigstore direction, by putting it outside the index, that saved them this issue. So I don't know if that's, I should put that as another option in here, which is don't mix and match. Make a runnable index one thing, and okay.
Certainly for anything that requires a DAG. Gotcha.
I see you messing with me. I see you messing with me.
I gotcha.
Derek's probably was over there eating his lunch and snickering.
No comments.
No comment.
Just chaos grenade, just trying to throw it out there. Yeah, so we got lots of options. I don't know. We
thought
really have
artifact
an idea.
type was. Let me check.
Define an artifact type is on the list. It's just the risk I threw out on that one is that there are going to be things that will define the artifact type on runnable images. So it won't be a binary. It will be a list lookup from the runtime saying, as a runtime, know how to run this or not. That plus any 1.0 compliant runtimes that don't know to look for the artifact type.
Oh, Brian, you were just kidding. Okay. I was going to say, wait a minute, don't we already have a config descriptor media type? It's like,
Oh,
yes.
no.
Oh,
Talking about
okay.
in the index.
Oh, in the index.
I was only
Which
half
is-
joking.
You only have joking. Hold on.
To answer Jory's question, historically, when we've gone through this, we usually battle back and forth in discussions like this. Eventually, we start to come to some kind of consensus, maybe. We then take it over to an issue if we haven't already been battling in the issue and keep battling the issue, or a PR, something like that. Debate back and forth a little while. Eventually, something gets merged, and then someone will come out later on just for a release and say, no, chaos, we can't do that. So all the chaos, all the indecision, lots of hemming and hawing, and people trying to think about how this is going to break whatever they've gotten written already out there.
Historically, this meeting has been one of discussion, not of consensus or decision, especially because it's not accessible to a large portion of maintainers. So the actual maintainer decisions happen on GitHub or the mailing lists.
So then would you take, for example, and this is just you guys teaching me how you normally do things. Would you take these options that you've discussed in the meeting and then put them out to the mailing list or back to a GitHub discussion and say, these are the 5, 7 different things we've been kicking tires on, input welcome, or do you kind of keep it a little closer for a little longer and narrow the options down, because you said something, Brandon, which happens a lot. Group tends to make a choice and then goes forward with something, and then at the 11th hour somebody says, wait, stop, chaos. And I would assume you'd kind of like to limit that last minute.
A lot of the discussion here is just kind of get the brainstorming. It's a lot more interactive. We get the feedback quicker of, okay, your idea is great, accept this. And then, is there an easy workaround? Is there not? The PRs are where we really try to lock down okay, people are really voting. I just wanted to make it clear that as much as that is the place where decisions are made, doesn't mean the decisions are permanent until we actually tag a release. And even then people come out around after the fact and say, yeah, that tag was bad. We need to redo that whole decision, which goes into the tag pagination discussion where folks are like, yeah, that whole 1.0 release we did way back, we did it wrong. Let's change it all.
It's sort of interesting when we describe config descriptor in the manifest, it's a container configuration. It's not runnable. It's a container, which of course has layers that are runnable. And now we're talking about artifacts that are runnable in a different context. May be contained, may not be contained.
I'm trying to follow your chat discussion here, Mike. You're trying to throw a config descriptor on the index now?
Brian asked, begged the question. Well, why don't we just use config descriptor?
I thought he was trying to pull that data up. I didn't think he was trying to add a config descriptor on the index.
Okay, I read it wrong. Then
I could be reading it wrong too. Brian, jump on in here. What direction were you going with that one?
I like to be ambiguous. No, I was kind of, it's like, well, if we're going to stick an artifact type in the index, that's just going to be the media type of the config. I don't know. The whole config is weird. Like the manifest config split, and now we're like, okay, well, let's get the media type of the config and stick it in the index. And it's like, well, why not stick the whole config descriptor in there? So you just go and grab that to determine if you can run the thing. And or you don't even have to grab the document. You can just look at it, I guess. But then I can see it's like, oh, okay, this is a regular OCI image. So let me look at this config blob and see if I can deal with the layers that it has. Are they Z standard? I don't support Z standard or whatever. It's all just this nesting of stuff that we either have to drill down or surface to the top. I guess it's just.
And you just hit a whole new chaos grenade for me, which is that we haven't really defined how a runtime could pick up between two different index entries, both for AMD 64 with different layer compression. How would you say this index entry has one compression type, this entry has a different compression type? We've kind of punted in the past and said, hey, maybe we should turn that into a transport level, but nobody really wants to do that because that would mean that the default is uncompressed, and that's too horrible for anybody that wants to even consider it. And it involves rewriting registries, and that's people get nervous on that side.
You can also treat that like, oh, here's my list of candidates. I've got 2 AMD 64s. Let me go look and see which is going to be the best for me. But just nothing does that. It's just going to pick the first one.
Except there is stuff that does that.
Oh,
Like that's literally how Containerd's platform vector code works.
oh, yes. But say you
Looks
have
at a
2
list of, say, ARM images and chooses the best one for the current platform. The first best one, the best first one.
It does that for platform, not for, oh, well, here's a tar GZ, here's a Z standard.
Second version, right?
Not yet.
Not yet, yeah.
Yeah.
Like that API needs some change, and it would behoove us to consider this as part of that also.
Yeah.
So if you're thinking about updating that platform selector code, what would you think would be a good thing to support in there? The stuff coming out of image compatibility has been looking at different options. Some of it has been saying, hey, what if we put annotations in there and we told the runtime, pass the configuration of the runtime that says, you, Mr. Runtime over here, or run on a machine with an NVIDIA. Anytime you see that NVIDIA annotation, that's a good one. You want to prefer that. Do we have the features in there so you can pick up CPU features? Or do we start making an external artifact that you then have to go and query refers and see, okay, let me hit the refers API, see if there's this extra artifact for compatibility details. So I want to download that for every entry that you think you might want to try to run. Or something else.
It's an interesting question. It definitely requires a lot of round tripping of all the tool sets, right, to get that answer correct in some kind of schedule, and it needs a minor.
If it's an external artifact, yes. All the other ones, if it's like
you don't want to change the expectation on how the older versions of the tools are going to work, right?
I'm doing some prototyping around that topic, and the artifact idea is quite bad. In general, to use artifact for the image selection, because all of the additional queries, as we talked in the compatibility group, but because I prototyped this and added 2 additional fields to the platform object. Sorry, the one exists already, which is platform features, and I added platform compatibilities. And from this, what I saw, there is some kind of ordering in the container decode. So I thought basically to order everything based on first compatibility length, then platform features length, and then you have a typical OS variant and architecture. It will make more sense when I have some ready prototype that I can show to you, and we can discuss if that makes sense or not. But probably if we move forward with compatibility, we would like to change a little bit the platform, how the selector for that works.
Marcin, are you talking to Cortana?
Sorry, again?
Are you talking to Cortana?
No.
Okay. Yeah, we have somebody committing some changes to Containerd in this area on some internal code, how we do implementation of platform selection.
That would be good if I can talk.
Yeah, she's looking at it already.
That's great.
We probably need a work group to talk about this.
We have one.
And while we're mucking with index, we probably need a work group on pods. That would give us a good reason to talk about runnables and artifacts in a pod that may be of a different manifest type.
Pods goes off in a whole different direction.
I'm just saying, there are other directions that are required to be covered in space.
Yeah. But for the platform selection, join us on the OCI compatibility. That's where we've been chatting about a lot of this. They're, like you just heard, Marcin's looking at some of this stuff right now.
Okay.
In terms of how we can do that in Containerd, we're talking about looking at different implementations. I completely forgot one, which is, I was talking about adding annotations, using the features list that we've already kind of got semi-reserved in the spec right now. We could add another field. We could create a new field called like compatibilities and just start putting entries in there. And I think a lot of them we've looked at.
They were there just to reserve, not necessarily to suggest using. We always felt there would be new fields, not.
When we were chatting with a couple of the Containerd maintainers, I don't know, was it Derek? Were you on that call? And it might have been Steve-O.
That was Steve-O and Phil.
Phil, okay. Yeah, we were chatting with them and they said, well, why don't you just use this, features field that's already here.
It's there that's usable, yes. And it's compatible as far as storage with the prior registries and things like that. But
but
they're not tested. Those fields are not tested. They're not validated. They're not typed. They're just name value pair.
They are typed in the reservation. I was like, we reserved this. The original type was this.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a list of strings.
Yeah.
But the target for that field was only CPU features or something else?
Originally, it was just CPU features. Doesn't mean that we couldn't make it something else. But
there was an effort at the time to provide a list of fields and it was decided in the end just to do them as annotations and just reserve them for now, just in case somebody wants to do these things. But the other platform types like ZOS and S39EX Power, when they came in, they haven't had anything yet that they wanted to explicitly use. So we've been, and the Windows guys have gone slightly different directions as well. But we're finally getting an impl with versioning selection. So all the way through the stack is the hope.
So you said you like annotations now. You want to use those? I was also thinking of the configuration. It would be like a Containerd toml file of saying, here's the priority for each of these. And that would give you the option of saying, here's the priority. If you ever see the Z standard annotation, you prefer that one.
Oh, yeah.
And
I mean, you can do a lot of stuff with annotations. This is true. And it is a cool way to extend. But how are you going to version that stuff? Where are the structures defined? The it's hard to revision strings.
Would it
Or
not
add
be
new
too in-
fields that extend those strings instead, maybe you should use a structure instead. Yeah, you could have a suggested parsing of those strings. And then that just gets hard to define.
Brian, that's just chaos. I can't handle that, Brian. That's just wrong.
Oh, what do you say now? Mixed layer
Mixed
compression.
layer compression types.
And
And the thing is, he's not wrong. There is going to be
some of
somebody
these-
doing it. The
some of these
base
layers
image.
are data and they need to be encrypted. And
No, I mean, not even the end. It's going to be the base image is going to be gzip, and your layers you add on top are going to be Z standard.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. We ran the hour out. Folks are already dropping off of this thing. Jory's been super good about taking all these good notes. So thank you, everybody. It's been, despite the fact that we always start quiet with this zero agenda, we run past the hour every time. So
All right.
any
I'm gonna
last words?
grab
Otherwise, have a good rest of the week.
chat. All right. Thanks
see you
all.
on GitHub.
Thanks.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
All right. Cheers all.
Sure.